And we're live. Go for it, Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Dallas. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This evening is a virtual neighborhood meeting for a project that is known as HousePad. We'll have the next slide, Dallas. Or my second slide, I guess. All right, so in terms of welcome and introductions, my name is Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson. I'm a principal planner here at the City of Longmont, and I organize and facilitate our neighborhood meetings. With us from the city side, from planning, we have Dawn Burchett, our planning manager, and Kristen Cody, who is a senior planner. On the engineering side, we have Josh Sherman, who is our development review engineering administrator, and Rachel Jones, who's a civil engineer. We also have Dallas Stiles, who is our live stream specialist, who keeps all of these virtual meetings running smoothly so that everyone can participate and tune in. On the applicant side, we've got Barb Brunk, we have Brian Williamson, James Bruntz, Walker Thrash, and Sarah Newton. So in terms of what we're going to cover this evening, I'm going to give a very brief project and process overview. I'm going to turn it over to Barb Brunk and her team to give a more detailed description of the project and what they are proposing for this location. And at that point, we would open it up for public comments and questions. So next slide, Dallas. So just in terms of virtual housekeeping, as I mentioned, we will have we will open the meeting up for comments and questions. They will be taken after the presentation. We'll take a 5-minute break during which people can call in. When it's time to call in, there will be a slide on the screen that has the phone number and the meeting ID and all of the instructions for calling in to speak with the applicant and the city team. When you do a call in, we ask that you mute the live stream when you're speaking so that we avoid feedback. So, and again, this information will be up again before when it's time to call in. So next slide. I will also add that this is a live stream neighborhood meeting. So a recording of this meeting will be available for future viewing on the City of Longmont YouTube channel. So if you have any neighbors who weren't able to tune in, who are interested in hearing what was said, it will be available for future viewing. That's a really nice feature of our virtual live stream neighborhood meetings. So with that, in terms of just some quick nuts and bolts of this particular project. This HousePad project concerns not quite 16.5 acres southeast of the Costco in the basically south of the Costco, I should say, in or near Harvest Moon Drive and Bountiful Avenue in what is known at least in our world as the Irwin Thomas annexation. What is proposed are a series of development applications and plan changes and plan amendments that would permit 175 to 190 roughly single family and townhome units. Next slide. So in terms of how our development review process works, we're in the very first steps. So step number 1 after a pre-application meeting is held is this neighborhood meeting. We require that applicants for major development applications hold a neighborhood meeting before they submit an application for review. And that way we're able to have an understanding of what some of the concerns from the community might be, so we can, keep those in mind as we're moving forward through the process. In this particular case, the applications that would be under consideration would be a comprehensive plan amendment, a concept plan amendment, because as I mentioned, this is part of what is called the Irwin Thomas annexation. There's a concept plan that is part of that annexation and would require amendment for this particular project. There would be a rezoning, an overall development plan developed, and a preliminary plat completed as well. There would be 2 separate sets of public hearings. The Planning and Zoning Commission would hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council. City Council is the decision-making body, and there would be an additional public hearing before City Council as well. Don't yet have a time frame for when those public hearings would be, because we're still, as I mentioned, at the very beginning of the process. And so it's not really known exactly how long it would take to get there. That said, prior to any public hearings, we do have notice requirements. So signs would be posted on the property as we're done for this particular neighborhood meeting, and mailed notices would be made, as well as there would be notice in the newspapers and on our city's website and such. Those would all be posted and mailed at least 14 days before any public hearing. So there will be notice of any of all future public hearings. Additionally, we do a notice of application submittal. So once an application is submitted for review, that notice is posted and mailed as well, so that folks in the community know that a process is underway. So that said, next slide. And I think at this point, we'll turn it over to Barb and her team.
Good evening, I'm Barb Brunk. Next slide, Dallas. This is the location of the house pad application. It's generally west of Harvest Moon, east of Bountiful, east of Martin, and north of Bountiful. So it's right here. This is the Costco. This is the Harvest Junction neighborhood, Quail Road neighborhoods down here, and this is Highway 119. Next slide. We're here this evening to present an overview of the house pad land use applications. I'll begin the discussion, and then Walker Thrash will add comments about the design intent for the neighborhood and the conceptual architecture for the homes. Our design team will be here to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Well, this site is lots 5 and 6 of the Irwin Thomas first filing. And at the time Costco went through the process, a portion of this property was sold to the city as part of that public-private partnership. The other piece came to the city at the end of last year. So again, as Jennifer said, the city actually owns the ground. The proposals are the land use amendment, the concept plan amendment, the rezoning, the preliminary plat, and the overall development plan. Next slide. This is kind of housekeeping stuff. Who's here this evening from the city and myself as far as future contact. And Jennifer already went through this process. The heart of it here is that we're at the beginning of the process, and you'll be getting lots of mail from us to tell you about the next steps as we move through the process. Next slide. This is a neighborhood meeting notice map. The required notice for these applications is 1,000 feet per the city code. And at the request of city staff, we also noticed the whole Harvest Junction neighborhood, all of the apartment dwellers at the Watermark Apartments, and the residential neighborhood along Quail Road, in an effort to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. You probably got a notice in the mail or saw one of the signs, and that's why you're here this evening. Next slide. House Pad is a cooperative effort between the City of Longmont, Vertical LLC, and the original landowner, who was the Golden family, to establish a beautiful, walkable, sustainable neighborhood of approximately 185 affordable and attainable for-sale homes. You hear those terms all the time, affordable homes and attainable homes. And in the City of Longmont, an affordable home has a specific definition. It is permanently deed restricted based on income limits that are set in the code. An attainable home is for people who make between 80 and 120% of the area mean income. Think firefighters, school teachers, city staff, people who we call the missing middle, who cannot find a place to live in Longmont. They work in Longmont and they drive to Longmont. So filling that gap is part of the goal of this process. And those attainable homes on this site, the plan is to have them deed restricted as well, for a minimum of 10 years with some exceptions. So this whole neighborhood is set to make sure that it stays available for families for both affordable and attainable homes in the city of Longmont. This is the first one of these projects we have for a for sale product. Most affordable housing you've seen happen has been apartments. Next slide. So this is the house pad applications overview. Again, we're going to amend the Envision Longmont land use plan to change land use on lots 5 and 6 of Irwin-Thomas first filing from multifamily neighborhood to mixed neighborhood to allow for development of for sale, affordable, and attainable homes. We'll amend the concept plan to match the land use amendment, rezone the property from multifamily neighborhood to planned unit development, again, to allow for development of the properties. The city will process a preliminary plat and an overall development plan to establish the framework for the infrastructure on the property. Next slide. So the existing land use is multifamily neighborhood. The proposed land use is mixed neighborhood. And again, that's the only change. So what that does is take the site from multifamily neighborhood, which is typically 18 to 35 units per acre and could be 4 stories tall, to mixed neighborhood, which is typically 6 to 18 units per acre and is intended for single family detached on smaller lots, townhomes, duplexes, and smaller multifamily. So that will allow us to develop this property as intended. And the 185 units on 16 acres comes out to about 11.5 units per acre. So it's in the middle of that density range for the mixed neighborhood. Next slide. This is a concept plan amendment. All 3 of those maps along the top of this slide are the existing concept plan that was approved in July of 2021. And you'll see that on that slide, in all 3 phases, this property is designated for multifamily neighborhood. The bottom 3 slides is the concept plan amendment. So that's the proposed concept plan. And again, you'll see that all 3 phases, this land use changes, and this changes to mixed neighborhood instead of multifamily neighborhood. That's the only thing that's changing on this concept plan. Nothing else on the Irwin-Thomas Annexation Number 1 Concept Plan Amendment 1, which is what we looked at in last year, is changing. Next slide. So this is just a little more detail. So that the site is got that bright blue line around it. Again, the existing thing on all of these concept plans is multifamily neighborhood. Next slide. Proposed concept plan, still 3 phases. This property is the only thing that's changing, and it's going to mixed neighborhood on all 3 phases. Next slide. We're going to rezone the property, which is lots 5 and 6 of Irwin-Thomas first filing, from multifamily neighborhood to planned unit development. So under the underlying land use designation of mixed neighborhood is the general guide for how the PUD will develop. Next slide. So a planned unit development is a method for a more creative and innovative design on a piece of property. It helps with details about the type of unit, the size of unit, the setback on the property, the width of the streets, the configuration of the open space. It really determines how it will feel for the people who live there. So it's about facilitating that creative design for, on this site, a higher density attached and detached residential project. Next slide. So there'll also be a preliminary plat. And the preliminary plat is basically the lots and blocks and streets and utilities. So that will establish the framework for future final subdivision of the property. So it has landscape plans, the streets, the grading, the drainage, and utility layout for the whole site. We anticipate that this property will be developed in phases, and the first phase of development will start against Harvest Moon. So it'll work from east to west. Next slide. So the house pad will also have an overall development plan, which is required as part of the ODP zoning. And it's a mix of single family, detached, and attached homes on tree-lined streets with the alley access and an open integrated pedestrian network. I'm going to turn it over to Walker, and he's going to talk about the design intent and how Vertical has envisioned this neighborhood and look and give you some samples of the architecture that's anticipated to be built on the property.
Thanks, Barb. Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to say, kind of backing up, originally we brought this concept to the city. We knew there was a piece of real estate in this area that was zoned and restricted for affordable housing at a higher density for rental. And so we came to the city and said, hey, what if we take a lower density approach and can create a for sale product that we can pencil out and make sense of for the middle of the market, with still some affordable units within it, but all for sale, which doesn't exist in the city of Longmont currently. They said, hey, you need to speak to the family that brought the land into this deal because they obviously have very strong concerns about creating affordable housing within the market. So we reached out to the Golden family and said, what do you think about it? We sat around the table, and it was evident early on that we wanted to kind of try to hit the middle of the market where there is a big gap currently between what is subsidized affordable and then obviously market rate units. And to be clear, our entire background is market rate development, either commercial and or residential. So a deed restricted product is really not our background. So we wanted to attack this from kind of a design forward approach, bring in architects we'd worked with on other projects. We have two different architects working on the first phase of this project, several engineers. But the idea was, can we create a high design, more attainable price point for people that, in the last 5 years, being smart and lucky to get into the market and be able to purchase before this last wave of serious inflation and home value. And now what's happening is 6% of the renters in the market can afford to buy a house. And that math is pretty rough. So here's the intent is, okay, let's create a neighborhood that truly just fits the house pricing in the 300s and 400s that is between these two markets where there's truly a gap in housing stock for sale residential. An important note, let's also lower the density requirement for this site in part of the zoning. And I think that is an important note for tonight. The idea is not to increase density here and more units. This site's currently zoned for hundreds of units of potential multifamily rental that's restricted affordable. So we go to the next slide. And my slides are loading slow on my side. So this is an example of architecture we're working on right now for a similar project with the exact same price point in a different market. But this is a for sale product. So this is very indicative of what we're working on, but obviously we're very early in the process here. So we are just starting to talk about concepts and architecture with the group, and we don't have visuals for this project yet. That would be premature of this meeting. But you can see here, there's a mix of single family, detached, and then attached townhome. But this is truly not a super dense development. Next slide. This again is a presentation from an interior design package we're working on a single detached single family home of the same caliber and same price points. And so this, as you can see, the idea here is not just working with kind of stock off the shelf materials. It is trying to create truly well-designed custom interiors and also feather that into a price point that makes sense for the middle of the market. I think this is the last slide on aesthetic, but I do want to put across on the initial site plan, there's a fair amount of budget that is set aside here to take care of true walking paths, tree-lined streets, amenities for the neighborhood itself, and allow for the connectivity to the rest of the community. And in all, this is meant to really look, feel, and truly be a neighborhood in and of itself, but also within the context of the residential that's there. And after that, I think I'll turn it back to you, Jennifer.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Walker and Barb. So at this point, let's see, in terms of the next steps, so following following this initial portion where the concept plan amendment is pursued and the comprehensive plan amendment and all the other various regulatory documents are amended and adopted. At that point, then there would be subsequent applications for site plans and really detailed engineering infrastructure plans. As I noted, once the application is submitted, there will be a notice of application sent to the community, signs will be posted, and ditto, same thing for future public hearings before the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. So next slide. I think I'm missing a slide here. Here we go. All right, so we're at the point now where we are about to open up the meeting for questions and comments. So just a few little ground rules we like to establish. Pretty common sense, but it's always nice to have a frame of reference. Everyone who calls in gets 3 minutes, so we follow the same rules as City Council, 3 minutes per speaker. State your name and where you live. We ask that you keep questions and comments related to the current proposal as opposed to other things that might be happening citywide. Also be additive, not repetitive, and be nice to everyone. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Dallas is going to, let's see, post the next slide. That is going to have the information. So you will dial the number on the screen. Once you get in, you will enter the meeting ID and you will be placed in the queue for call-in. And once we rejoin the meeting after the break, Dallas will be calling upon people by the last 3 digits of your phone number. As I noted previously, please mute the live stream so we don't have feedback. And if you have additional questions after you've spoken initially, you'll have the option, if you still have time remaining in your 3 minutes, to raise your hand to ask additional questions. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. If you have questions or comments, dial 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 896-2632-7125. Thank you.
We have about 1 minute left on our 5-minute timer. If you are trying to call in, now is the time. The number is 1-888-788-0099. And again, that meeting ID is 896-2632-7125. We have about 30 seconds left. Call in now if you have a question or comment. Thanks. We are up on our 5-minute timer. Right now, we have no callers in the queue. I did see we had a caller. Great, there they are. Cool. Give me just a second, Jennifer. I'll admit them. Caller, if you are listening in right now, make sure to mute your live stream because you're about to hear me through the Zoom meeting. All right, giving it just a second so that they've caught up with us. Callers, I'm going to address you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. It looks like we've got 2 callers tonight. Let me just make sure I got you both written down. Terrific. All right, we're going to start with caller with the last 3 digits 090. Caller with the last 3 digits 090. If you would hit *6 on your device to unmute. Please do that now. Caller with the last 3 digits of their phone number 090. Please hit *6 to unmute yourself. Hello.
Yeah, hi, this is George Lowe. I live at 31 Western Sky Circle in Harvest Junction. My
Great.
few questions
Thanks,
that I have is, number one, is this community going to have an HOA association? Number two, is there an approximate price range that these houses are going to be going for? And number three, during construction, is the builder going to utilize some different measures that there's not going to be dust or other things that are actually going to come over to the community over here? Thank you. Different measures that there's not going to be dust or other things that are actually.
So I am going to let Barvin Walker take that question since it's really specific. I can say that there would be an HOA. We do require those for maintenance of common areas and such. But as far as price range and construction practices, I'm going to turn it over to the team that is actually doing the development.
I'll let Walker speak to house range, but as far as construction practices, the city of Longmont is pretty diligent about erosion control and dust management and all those things that make nuisance construction a nuisance. So that'll be part of the city review process, how that gets taken care of at the time the project is under construction. And Walker, price range in the high 3s to upper 4s so far?
I think there is. You can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. There will be some product that I'd say would be in the mid to low 300s. That's going to be a minimal amount because that's the toughest one to develop at the price point. But it will go all the way into the upper 400s. With the big caveat is that's if we were putting this housing stock on the ground today, right? Obviously, economic factors are at play. There's quite a long time swath between today and then, but the current pricing, that's exactly the range it would be.
Great. Thank you.
Great. We'll go on to our last caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 151. Caller 151, if you would please hit *6 on your device to unmute yourself. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Bruce McQueen. 425 Western Sky Circle in Harvest Junction
Great.
Village.
Bruce,
Um,
you got 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm just wondering about the process for how decisions are made about the concept of these plots, the two of them. And it just thinks it's in my mind that a large apartment building would be next to Costco rather than the development that's being proposed. So that's kind of, if you understand my question, how those decisions are made, and if I'm making any sense about the apartment building being closer to Costco.
So I will, I'm gonna let Barb and possibly Dawn jump in for that particular question.
Two things. The affordable housing property was identified and purchased by the city of Longmont at the time the Costco came forward. As far as the density, I mean, we have to go through the process to ask permission to get this approved. So it's not done. You know, there is a review process, and we apply and everybody looks at it. And then the planning commission makes a recommendation to city council and city council decides. But the heart of the matter was the opportunity on this specific property between the city and the previous landowner to have a for sale product. And people aren't building condos because they can't make them work from a ownership point of view. So when Walker came to the table to develop homes, like actual physical houses and townhomes that people can buy and afford, that's how the underlying density was determined. So Don, you want to kick in after that?
Sure. Mr. McQueen, thank you for your question. And as Barb indicated when she was doing her presentation, the original land use plan for this area was for high density residential, which typically would have been for the larger apartment buildings, similar to what is north of your development up near the Martin Street Bridge and the Greenway, the Left-Hand Creek Greenway. But again, the city did purchase this property, and then when Mr. Thrash approached the city with the idea of doing for sale ownership housing that could be actually purchased, I think the city looked at that and saw that as a benefit of having an opportunity for folks to own versus rent, and that's why this is being considered. But you are right. In general, I would say that it is very typical near our commercial areas to have more of the higher density, kind of an apartment type of development next to those kind of uses.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay.
Great,
And with that, we have no more callers, Jennifer.
all right, well, thank you so much. And so thank you, Dallas, for doing what he does to keep all of these running smoothly. Thank you so much to Barb and her team, and Barb and Walker and her team, as well as the folks from the city side who were here on hand to answer any questions. With that, contact information moving forward, Dawn Burchett, the planning manager, our planning manager with the city of Longmont, from the city side is who you should contact. And from the applicant side, Barb Brunk is the applicant representative. So you have their contact information up here. As I mentioned, this meeting has been recorded and will be on the city's YouTube channel for future viewing. So again, feel free to rewatch the meeting, share it with your neighbors, and if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much and have a great evening.